And the fallout from one of the most uniquely devastating events in Texas history continues. 5 members of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas Board of Directors, including the chair, resigned from their positions effective at the conclusion of their recent board meeting. Now, according to filings with the Public Utility Commission of Texas. Now, this follows news that lawsuits have begun to pour in, claiming that the Texas Energy Council is responsible for the death of an 11-year-old boy. Christian Pineda was found dead last week in his family's Houston home, according to a new lawsuit. Now, the suit accuses ERCOT and Entergy of gross negligence and seeks damages of over $100 million. Entergy said in a statement to news outlets, "We are deeply saddened by the loss of life in our community. We are unable to comment due to pending litigation." ERCOT added, quote, "We haven't yet reviewed the lawsuits and will respond accordingly once we do. Our thoughts are with all Texans who have and are suffering due to this past week. However, because approximately 46% of privately owned generation tripped offline this past Monday morning, we are confident that our grid operators made the right choice to avoid a statewide blackout." Greg, I'm going to send it back to you.
All right, thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West is a Christian constitutional conservative, a combat veteran, a former member of the U.S. Congress. He's also the chairman of the Texas Republican Party. Sir, welcome to the program. All right, there we go. We've got the blame game happening not only in Washington, but in Texas with this energy. What information can you give us concerning what happened in that storm here in Texas?
Well, again, our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of the little boy down in Conroe, Texas, lost his life, and all those families who lost loved ones and still suffering from the ramifications. It was very simple. You're supposed to have, the foresight and leadership. We knew at least 10 days ahead of time that this storm was coming our way. But you've got to go back to 2006 and think about the fact that since 2006, the state of Texas has invested about $19 billion of taxpayer subsidies into these renewable energy sources. And what did we come to find out here was that it failed us. In the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen the takedown of 2 to 3 of our coal-fired plants, and we have trifold increased our dependency upon wind energy up to 23 to 25%. And so what happened with those grid operators from ERCOT, there's 9 of them on each shift, they saw a degradation in the wind energy distribution output from that 23 to 25% down to 3%. And what they did was they sent a letter to the Department of Energy, and the Department of Energy, David Huizenga Jr., refused to allow the state of Texas to increase its output of natural gas. As a matter of fact, it told them that if they wanted to go outside the state and purchase other energy, it would have to be done at $1,500 per megawatt hour. That's a 6,000% increase from last February of 2020. And that's why a lot of people are seeing these exorbitantly high utility bills, because they're on market rate based plans. So the failure to winterize our systems, the failure to have a proper backup, the lack of foresight, this all comes down to, incompetence and mismanagement. It shouldn't be about the blame game. It should be talking about the responsibility and accountability that has to be taken. And woe to us that we had members of the ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, that didn't even live in Texas, to include the chairman and the vice chairman of the board of ERCOT.
Okay, so I just heard you say something. I want to clarify, make sure what I heard, that they recognized what was happening when it was happening and went to the federal government, Energy, and asked to buy natural gas, and they were not allowed to. Is that correct?
Yeah. They first of all asked to increase the natural gas output, and that was denied because they were told it would be a violation of emission standards. 85% of Texas is on its own grid, the other 15% neighboring states, Louisiana, Oklahoma. So we were not allowed to increase our output of natural gas, which we have in an abundance, and therefore they were told that they could buy additional energy, but we came down to the bottom line, and they had to institute these rolling blackouts and shutdowns.
Well, natural gas is clean, though. That's what I've always been told.
Me too. And that's why I don't understand why the Department of Energy would deny Texas to turn on more natural gas into the system. We should not be relying upon these renewables because they ended up not being reliable in this circumstance.
Absolutely true. Thank you. It's absolutely true. One question, there's a lot of people I'm hearing that I run into at the market or getting gas or whatever, and they're talking to me, and they're tired of the politicians holding hearings all the time here in the state of Texas, but mainly in Washington, and nothing getting done. Is there any remedy for that?
Yeah, if you don't like to have all these hearings and all of the rhetoric out there, then you should look at replacing the people that you have as your representatives. You know, right now, I mean, the last time Texas had this type of a storm was 2011. I remember that. That was the Super Bowl year. I think it was Green Bay and Pittsburgh played here at the AT&T Stadium. You had an incredible ice storm. And we talked about hardening the grid system here in Texas because, like I said, 85% is Texas' own grid system. We're not on the East Coast or the West Coast interconnection. So all through this time, we have not done anything to harden that grid. As a matter of fact, no one even checked to see if our grid systems and infrastructure had been winterized. And again, you knew 10 days ahead of time that this was coming.
Yeah, thank you so much. One other story here. The Second Amendment appears to be getting some support in the state of Indiana. On Monday, House members voted to get rid of the license needed to carry a handgun in Indiana. HB 1369 reportedly repeals a law requiring people to get a license to carry a handgun in Indiana. The measure passed the Indiana House with a vote of 65-31 is now headed over to their Senate. If passed by the Senate and signed by the governor, the bill would eliminate handgun licenses in March of 2022. And another state is looking to protect Americans from the impending Biden administration gun control agenda. The Oklahoma Senate wants to preserve Second Amendment rights with Senate Bill 631. If passed, SB 631 would make Oklahoma a sanctuary state. Here we go, from enforcing any additional gun laws put on it by the Biden administration. I want to bring John Graves in on this, and I want to get Colonel West thoughts concerning that. John, I'm seeing states now making legislation in advance of what could be coming from the federal government. Your thoughts?
And that's exactly what they should be doing. Last week we talked a lot about the First Amendment Constitution. Now we're into the Second Amendment. And you have to remember, a lot of people have a misconception of the purpose of having the Second Amendment and the right to own guns is because of an out-of-control government. So that the government's supposed to be from the people, by the people, for the people. And when it's not, they have to have some type of recourse. So if the governments, anytime you have a socialist or communist government, they have to disarm their people. They have to take that away. And there's even a regulation where they're trying to get people to license ammunition, not just the weapon, but the ammunition itself, which is what they're going to take away. If you take the ammunition away, it doesn't matter if you have guns. So it's right, and most people don't realize this, but the 10th Amendment is just as critical as separation of powers. It says the federal government should do a few things and do them well and leave the states alone. So it's amazing some of these states like Oklahoma are being assertive and getting out in front of this issue and basically preserving what the Constitution says is their right under this.
I'm so glad. It's so true. I'm so glad of my home state, Oklahoma. I'm a Sooner. Colonel, I want to bring you in on this because I have a big flag that hangs in my study that's a flag that was from the Alamo, and it says, "Come and take it." 185 years ago today, Colonel William Barrett Travis wrote a letter from the Alamo. And it seems apropos to talk about this right now with all of this about the Second Amendment. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, you think about it. That flag, the "Come and Take It" flag, came from Gonzales, Texas, when the Mexican cavalry showed up on October the 2nd of 1835, and they demanded a cannon back. And the Texians there came out and said, "Come and take it," because they weren't going to allow themselves to be disarmed. And even when you think about how this nation got started, it is all related to the Second Amendment because the British landed and marched inland toward Concord, Massachusetts to destroy a weapons and armament factory. One of the things our founding fathers understood is that an armed individual is a citizen. A disarmed or unarmed individual is a subject. And that's why they took the field at Lexington Green on April the 19th of 1775. So in full disclosure, I'm a board member of the National Rifle Association and a life member of the Texas State Rifle Association. And John Graves is absolutely correct. The history of totalitarian systems, socialist systems, Marxist, communist systems, is that they first and foremost must disarm people in order to have complete tyrannical control over them. The most recent example was Venezuela, one of the first things that Hugo Chavez did. Now, what I do see happening, constitutional nullification has been passed in North Dakota. They're not going to follow anything that comes out of the Biden administration. It's not in concert with the Constitution. In Missouri, they have some sheriffs that have said that they will arrest federal government agents who try to confiscate weapons of legal law-abiding gun owners. So again, that's why constitutional carry is one of our legislative priorities here for the Republican Party of Texas, because we need to have that.
And more Christian leaders are speaking out about the Equality Act, which may come up for a vote this week. This time, it's Franklin Graham, the head of Samaritan's Purse, says the act will diminish religious freedom. And in a Facebook post on Monday, Graham called the act deceiving, said it has nothing to do with equality, and called it a smokescreen for America to accept the LGBTQ agenda. And speaking of the Equality Act, while it is a piece of left-wing legislation crafted by Democrats, one Republican is trying to sink her teeth into it. According to the Christian News Journal, Marjorie Taylor Greene has filed 3 America First amendments to the Equality Act. Critics of the act say in its current form, it destroys women's rights, religious rights, and the rights of the unborn. The Republican from Georgia's amendments would reportedly change that legislation to protect women and girls in sports, defend the rights of churches and religion, and it would allow individuals to sue the federal government if their religious rights are violated. Greg, I'm going to send it back to you.
According to a report from Breitbart News, the Biden administration is holding unaccompanied minors in Border Patrol custody longer than is legally allowed. This sounds familiar. The fact that this is happening after the Democrats spent the last 4 years berating the Trump administration's approach to immigration is just one more example of the left's nonsensical approach to leadership. Border Patrol officials have reported that they held more than 800 unaccompanied alien children in custody, despite the legal requirements to release the children to other federal agencies within 72 hours. More than 212 remain in custody longer than the legal limit. Biden's press secretary spoke about the facility during a news briefing yesterday. I want you to listen to her interaction with Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy. Watch this.
Trump, there have been horrifying scenes at the border of kids being kept in cages, and Kamala Harris said, basically, babies in cages is a human rights abuse being committed by the United States government. So how is this any different than that?
We very much feel that way. These are facilities. Let me be clear here. One, there's a pandemic going on. I'm sure you're not suggesting that we have children right next to each other in ways that are not COVID safe, are you?
In January of 2021, Border Patrol agents have apprehended 5,871 unaccompanied minors, up from 4,995 in December in 2020 and just over 3,000 in January of 2020. Well, here's a win for the state of Texas when it comes to deportation policy at the border in the South. According to the Epoch Times, late on Tuesday, a judge ruled the Biden administration cannot enforce a pause on most deportations. U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton agreed to issue a preliminary injunction that the state of Texas requested. The judge ruled that Texas' argument that it would incur financial cost having to detain immigrants otherwise would have been deported was a legitimate argument. All right, Colonel West, we are in a border state. All of these things, it seems interesting that what was so bad, kids in cages of the last 4 years, isn't a bad thing now. Your thoughts?
Well, it's very perplexing to me that when you come in as the president of the United States of America, one of the first things you want to do by executive order is to, put Americans out of work. But then at the same time, by executive order, you want to destabilize the country and open up our borders. Mr. Graves, John Graves, talked about the 10th Amendment. If you go to the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, Clause number 3, it talks about the states being able to protect themselves in case of an imminent danger. And I think that when you have thousands of people crashing along your border, that is an imminent danger. So Texas and other border states need to step up and make sure that they're doing the things for their safety and security. And I found it really laughable that all of a sudden Ms. Jen Psaki is talking about caring for these kids that are coming across the border illegally and them not spreading COVID, when I know for certain Border Patrol agents have been telling me that they're not even checking these individuals coming into the United States of America for COVID whatsoever. So I don't want to see a spike of that happening in Texas when we're trying to get around the issue of COVID-19. So I don't understand how anyone can say they're the president of the United States of America, but they don't respect the sovereignty of the United States of America and the sovereignty of the states, and they want to flood this place, our state, with illegal immigrants.
And that's where I want to bring you in, John. That goes directly to what I was going to ask you. The sovereignty of the United States. Isn't that the responsibility of the federal government? One of their responsibilities? You're not a nation without a border, are you?
Exactly. And I agree with 100% of everything Colonel West just said. I wish we had more leaders like him in all 50 states. And so people that are listening, vote for that kind of leadership in your state, please, wherever you live. Our nation is a nation of laws. It is a nation of borders. The very definition of a nation is that it has borders. God is clear about that all the way through the Bible. Even Israel, this is the boundaries. These are the lines that were here. And notice this, because this can slip right by you. What was the response of the Biden administration when they were asked about, hang on a second, I thought concentration camps is what detaining people at the border was, according to the Democrat left. Oh, but we don't want them to have COVID. So you can have them in concentration camps if you don't want them to have COVID. It was COVID that they used to violate the Constitution to let everybody vote early and vote late, and vote in violation of the Constitution and the state legislatures. So notice the hypocrisy. I like the way you said it. Quoting the country song. If they didn't have double standards, they would have no standards at all.
And former President Donald Trump is fighting back against censorship and appealing his suspension from Facebook. It's been reported that the Facebook Oversight Board will hear an appeal from the former president's legal team in an attempt to get his Facebook and Instagram restored. You'll remember that Mr. Trump's accounts were suspended from the social media platforms following the attack on the Capitol, which the left was quick to pin on the president. The Trump ban is the most consequential case yet for that oversight board, carrying far-reaching political implications for the nation. And the oversight board has 90 days to make a decision, but a ruling is expected more quickly. Its decision is binding and cannot, listen to this, cannot be overruled by CEO Mark Zuckerberg or any other Facebook executive. I'm going to send it back to you, Greg.
Thanks, Mike. That's very interesting. I want to remind everybody we were there. We had Tim Fox there at the Capitol when all that happened, and he can tell you firsthand he saw Antifa and BLM involved in that. Colonel, I want to bring you back in on this. It seems like people are getting pushed in every way, whether it's censorship, the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, and all of these areas, the gender things that are happening. What's the average American supposed to do, average believing Christian American supposed to do right now?
Well, I think without a doubt, first and foremost, as a Christian, you should pray. You should recognize this evil that we're confronting. You should go to Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18. You need to put on the full armor of God and understand that now is the time for the body of Christ to stand up. But then you also have to do your civic duty of engaging with your state representative and your state senators to make sure that we have strong state legislators and people that are fighting to make sure we have strong state legislation and laws passed in the state that protect us.
Amen. I think it's absolutely true. Thank you, sir, for your leadership and what you're doing. Thank you for being with us today. I so appreciate it. God bless you, all that you hold dear. John Graves, I want to ask you, sir, final thoughts for the body of Christ and what we should do and what we should be doing.
You know, I love the way Alan West just said it. Colonel West basically said you should pray so you can do things in the heavenly realm, but you should also do your civic duty. We're citizens of heaven and we're citizens of this earth, and we're called to bring heaven down on this earth, and that means getting engaged in the process.